Lucia Alvarez tapped her foot impatiently on the wooden floor of her small Bali villa, her eyes flickering between the clock and her laptop screen. The afternoon sun poured through the windows, but her mood was anything but bright. "Where is it?" she muttered under her breath. It was almost 2 p.m., and the package she had been waiting for all morning had still not arrived. Her inbox was full of pending client emails, and she couldn't start any of her new content projects without her equipment. Her new camera, tripod, and lighting gear were supposed to arrive today. As a digital content creator who had chosen to work remotely from Bali, her tools were everything. Frustrated, she slammed her laptop shut and crossed her arms, leaning against the sofa. Just as she was about to give up hope, a knock echoed from the front door. Lucia practically ran to open it. Standing there was a young man in a courier uniform, a local delivery service logo printed neatly on his shirt. He held a large cardboard box in his arms. "Package for Lucia Alvarez?" he asked politely. "Yes, that's me," Lucia said, her voice filled with relief. The courier smiled briefly and handed over the heavy box. Lucia signed the receipt quickly and carried the box inside with excitement. But as soon as she tore it open, her face dropped. Inside were piles of colorful batik clothes and some delicate ceramic figurines, definitely not a camera or tripod. "What the?" Lucia muttered, bewildered. She rushed back outside. The courier, who had just mounted his motorbike, turned his head at the sound of her calling. "Excuse me. This isn't my package!" Lucia exclaimed, lifting the box to show him. The courier frowned and dismounted. His name tag read Assad. He inspected the box with a confused look. "Oh no, I must have mixed up the deliveries," Assad said, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. "Your real package might still be in the van. Please wait a minute." Lucia sighed and nodded. A few minutes later, Assad returned, slightly out of breath, carrying another box. "This one's yours, I double-checked," he said, offering it with a sheepish grin. Lucia inspected the label carefully. Yes, her name was clearly printed there. "Thanks," she said, still a little annoyed but trying to be polite. "I'm really sorry," Assad added. "If anything's damaged, please let me know." "It's fine," Lucia said with a wave of her hand. "Mistakes happen." Just as Assad was about to leave, his eyes caught the mis-delivered box still sitting by Lucia's door. "Oh, wait! That box belongs to Mr. Maid, one of my regular customers. He'll kill me if I lose it," Assad said, hurrying over. But as he bent down to pick it up, his elbow accidentally knocked over a large clay flower pot sitting on Lucia's porch. Crash! The pot shattered into dozens of pieces across the stone floor. Assad froze, looking absolutely horrified. Lucia stared at the mess, blinking in disbelief. "I'm so sorry," Assad stammered. Lucia took a deep breath and forced a smile. "It's okay. I'll just buy a new one." "Are you sure?" Assad asked, his guilt written all over his face. "Yes. Please just go before you break anything else," Lucia teased lightly. Assad chuckled nervously, climbed onto his motorbike, and sped off into the street. Lucia watched him disappear, then turned back to the shattered remains of her flower pot with a sigh. "This day just keeps getting better," she muttered. Little did she know, that clumsy courier would soon change her life in ways she never imagined. That evening, after a long and exhausting day of fixing the shipping confusion and trying to catch up on work, Lucia sat on her small balcony. The tropical air was thick with the scent of rain about to fall. She needed a change of scenery, a place where she could work without feeling trapped in her villa. A friend had once mentioned a small cafe near the beach, supposedly quiet and cozy, with excellent coffee. With nothing to lose, Lucia grabbed her bag, slung her laptop over her shoulder, and headed out. The cafe was called Coffee Bloom, written in neat white letters on a wooden sign. It looked modest but charming, with bamboo furniture and soft yellow lights hanging from the ceiling. Lucia entered, glancing around. Only a few customers were seated at scattered tables. She approached the counter, and froze. Behind the counter, wiping a cup, was none other than Assad. He looked up and grinned sheepishly when he saw her. "You again," Lucia said, raising an eyebrow. Assad laughed. "Welcome to my cafe." "Your cafe?" she asked, surprised. He nodded. "Delivering packages is just my side hustle. This place is my real job." Lucia blinked, processing this new information. Judging by his courier uniform and beat-up motorbike, she had assumed Assad was just a regular delivery guy. Apparently not. "Well, I'll take a cappuccino," she said, smiling despite herself. "With or without sugar?" Assad asked, already moving behind the coffee machine. "Without, please." The rich, comforting sound of the espresso machine filled the air. In moments, Assad placed a steaming cup of cappuccino in front of her. As Lucia settled at a corner table and opened her laptop, Assad hesitated nearby. "You're a digital nomad, right?" he asked. Lucia looked up, a bit surprised he guessed correctly. "Yeah. I create travel content, write reviews, and do freelance projects." Assad nodded. "That's why you panicked about the package?" Lucia chuckled. "Exactly. No gear, no work." Assad pulled out a chair and sat across from her casually, as if they had known each other for a while. "You're not from here, obviously," he said, his tone gentle. "Nope. Spain. Barcelona, to be exact." "And why Bali?" he asked curiously. Lucia sipped her cappuccino, savoring the taste. It was good, rich and smooth. "I needed a change," she said simply. Assad nodded thoughtfully but didn't pry further. There was something about his calmness that Lucia found unexpectedly comforting. Maybe it was the warmth in his voice. Maybe it was his grounded energy. Or maybe it was just that, for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel judged or questioned. And as the rain finally began to fall softly outside, Lucia realized she didn't mind spending a little more time in this small, cozy cafe. And maybe, unknowingly, a little more time with Assad too. The rain continued to fall in soft sheets, drumming gently on the roof of the small cafe. Lucia sat in the corner, laptop open but ignored, her fingers loosely wrapped around the warm cappuccino cup. She found herself watching Assad as he moved behind the counter, polite with the few customers, quick with his hands, and calm in his demeanor. There was something different about him, something Lucia couldn't quite explain. After a while, the cafe grew quieter. Only the sound of the rain and the gentle clinking of cups filled the air. Assad took a seat at a nearby table, wiping his hands on a small towel. "You're not used to rain like this, are you?" he asked with a half-smile. Lucia chuckled. "In Barcelona, it rains, but not like this. Here it feels heavier. More alive." Assad nodded thoughtfully. "Rain is a mercy here. People pray for it during the dry season." Lucia tilted her head slightly. "Pray for it?" He smiled. "Yes. In Islam, rain is considered a blessing from God." Lucia blinked, surprised. It was the first time Assad had mentioned religion. Most people she had met so far in Bali didn't talk openly about faith. There was something refreshing about how naturally it came from him, without any pressure, without any show. "You're Muslim?" she asked gently. Assad nodded. "Alhamdulillah, yes." There was a simple, steady pride in his voice, not arrogant, not defensive. Just peaceful. Lucia stirred her coffee slowly, processing the information. She realized, looking back, that it made sense. The calm way he carried himself, his politeness, his patience even when she had been annoyed about the package. "That's beautiful," Lucia said finally. Assad gave her a small, appreciative smile. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a while, a comfortable kind of silence. Lucia found herself wanting to know more, but not because she felt obligated. It was something deeper. A pull inside her, subtle but undeniable. "Did you grow up here?" she asked. Assad leaned back in his chair. "Partially. I was born here. But I spent a few years in Jakarta. Came back to Bali after life reminded me what really matters." Lucia sensed the weight behind his words but didn't press. Assad continued, his voice soft. I lost someone important. My younger sister. She was sick for a long time. I worked hard, tried to help, but sometimes you realize you're not in control. No matter how much you plan, life belongs to God. Lucia felt a lump form in her throat. She didn't know what to say. She had lost people too, friends, distant relatives. But Assad's words carried a depth she hadn't encountered before. A kind of acceptance. A kind of strength. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Assad nodded. It's part of life. She was stronger than me. She always reminded me to be grateful, no matter what. Lucia smiled faintly. She sounds like she was amazing. She was, Assad said, his eyes momentarily distant. A few moments later, he shifted the conversation back with an easy smile. Anyway, enough about me. What about you? Why did you leave Spain? Lucia hesitated. She had rehearsed her answer 100 times for people she met during her travels. Oh, I just wanted to see the world. Or, I needed adventure. But sitting across from Assad, those answers felt shallow. She paused. I guess I felt empty. Assad didn't react immediately. He just waited, patient. I had everything people said should make me happy. Lucia continued. A good job, nice apartment, friends, but inside, it felt like something was missing. Like I was just existing. Assad nodded slowly. Sometimes the heart knows before the mind does. Lucia looked at him sharply. You believe that? I do, Assad said. The heart was made to seek truth. We can drown it in distractions, but deep down, it knows. Lucia stared at her coffee, his words ringing louder in her mind than the rain outside. Nobody had ever said something like that to her before. They talked for a little while longer about light topics, travel, food, the quirks of Bali life. But for Lucia, something had shifted. A door inside her mind, previously locked tightly, had creaked open just a little. As she left the cafe later that evening, Assad called out, Take care, Lucia. She turned back and smiled. You too, Assad. And as she walked through the damp streets toward her villa, Lucia realized that for the first time in a long while, she wasn't just existing. She was feeling. The next few days unfolded like a slow, gentle melody. Lucia found herself returning to Coffee Bloom more often, not just for the coffee, but for the peace she felt there. Sometimes she would sit for hours, working silently on her laptop while Assad worked behind the counter. Sometimes they would chat, about simple things, about deeper things. One day, after the rain had cleared and the air smelled of fresh earth, Lucia gathered the courage to ask him a question that had been stirring inside her for days. Assad, she said as he wiped down a table nearby, can I ask you something personal? He looked up, curious but open. Of course. What does Islam really teach? I mean, beyond what people say on the news. Assad smiled gently and pulled out a chair across from her. It teaches us, he said, that life has a purpose. That we were created by God, not by accident. That every moment, every breath is a gift. And that true peace comes from knowing your Creator and living according to His guidance. Lucia listened intently. It's not just rituals or rules, Assad continued. It's about the heart. About gratitude, patience, mercy. About seeing yourself as part of something bigger than just yourself. Lucia felt a strange tightness in her chest. Is it hard? She asked softly. Some days, Assad admitted. But it's also beautiful. Because you're never alone. You're always connected to the one who made you. For a long moment, Lucia said nothing. She just looked at Assad, this simple man, who delivered packages on a motorbike, who ran a tiny cafe, who spoke about God with a kind of certainty she had never known. And for the first time, Lucia wondered. Maybe what was missing from her life wasn't adventure. Maybe it wasn't success. Maybe it was something bigger. Maybe it was faith. The days melted into each other like colors in a sunset. Lucia found herself caught between two worlds, the life she had built on the surface, and the stirring questions inside her that she could no longer ignore. Every visit to Coffee Bloom deepened that tension. Assad was never pushy, never preachy. He simply lived what he believed. It was in the way he treated his customers, in the patience he showed when things went wrong, in the calmness that seemed to settle the entire cafe. Lucia admired it, envied it, even. One late afternoon, after finishing some work, Lucia stayed back as the cafe began to close. The sky outside was washed in pink and orange, and a cool breeze whispered through the open windows. Assad wiped down the tables while soft instrumental music played in the background. Lucia hesitated, then said, "Do you ever feel lost?" Assad paused, cloth still in hand, and turned toward her. "I used to," he said honestly. "Before I understood why I was here." Lucia looked down at her hands. "And now?" He smiled gently. "Now I still have bad days, but I know I'm never truly lost. Because I know who to turn to." Lucia swallowed, feeling her throat tighten. I don't know who to turn to anymore," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Assad pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "You don't have to figure it all out at once," he said. "Sometimes it starts with just one step. One question." Lucia blinked at him. "Like what?" Assad leaned back, thoughtful. "Ask yourself who created you. And why?" Lucia let his words settle deep inside her. Who created me? Why am I here? Questions she had buried under years of busy schedules, travel, and distractions suddenly surfaced with painful clarity. She nodded slowly. "I don't know the answers." Assad didn't pressure her. Instead, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small, beautifully bound book. "This is the Qur'an," he said, setting it gently on the table. "It's in Spanish, your language. If you want, you can read it." Lucia stared at the book as if it were a fragile treasure. "I'm not trying to force anything," Assad added quickly. "Just, sometimes it's good to hear from the source itself, not from what the world says." Lucia touched the cover lightly. It felt peaceful. Unexpectedly peaceful. "I'll read it," she said softly, surprising herself. Assad's smile was warm, proud but humble. "Take your time." That night, Lucia sat on her balcony, the Qur'an resting on her lap. The stars were scattered across the sky like diamonds, and the sound of distant waves filled the silence. She opened the book cautiously, almost reverently. The first verse she read in Spanish translation was simple. "In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful." Her chest tightened. Tears welled up in her eyes before she even understood why. There was something so gentle, so reassuring. She flipped through pages, reading fragments. "Indeed, in the remembrance of God, hearts find rest. And He is with you wherever you are. Verily, with hardship comes ease." Lucia wiped her eyes. She had spent years searching for peace, in places, in people, in achievements. And here, in a small, quiet book, she found words that seemed to speak directly to the hole inside her heart. The next morning, Lucia returned to Coffee Bloom with a different look in her eyes. Not confusion. Not doubt. But searching. Assad noticed immediately but said nothing as he served her the usual cappuccino, without sugar. When the cafe quieted down, Lucia finally spoke. "I read some of it," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Assad looked up, patient. "It felt like someone was talking to me," she continued, struggling to find the right words. "Not just telling me rules. Talking to my heart." Assad's eyes softened. "That's because it is." Lucia placed her hand flat on the table. "I have so many questions," she said. "I'll answer what I can," Assad replied warmly. "And what I can't, we can find together." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking. Lucia asked about prayer. She asked about God's mercy. She asked about forgiveness, about heaven, about why bad things happen. And through it all, Assad answered calmly, patiently, always bringing her back to the oneness of God, the beauty of submission, the comfort of trusting a creator bigger than oneself. By the time the sky turned deep blue outside, Lucia leaned back in her chair, overwhelmed, but not afraid. "You know," she said quietly, "this feels like coming home." Assad smiled, a light shining in his eyes. "Because your heart," he said, "was always looking for its home." The next few days, Lucia didn't rush. She took her time. She read more from the Qur'an. She asked more questions. She spent long evenings just thinking, walking by the beach, feeling the sand between her toes and staring at the endless ocean. And every step, she felt herself drawing closer. Closer to something real. Closer to something eternal. Closer to Allah. One evening, after sunset, Lucia sat again in Coffee Bloom. The cafe was nearly empty, the lights soft and golden. Assad approached her table with 2 cups of coffee, one for her, one for himself. They sat quietly for a moment, sipping. Finally, Lucia set down her cup and looked him in the eyes. "Assad," she said, voice steady, I want to become Muslim." Assad blinked, stunned for a second, before a wide, humble smile spread across his face. "Are you sure?" he asked gently. Lucia nodded firmly. "I've never been more sure of anything." The night was quiet, the streets of Bali wrapped in a soft stillness. Lucia sat in her room, staring at the small Spanish Qur'an lying open in front of her. The verses she had read echoed in her heart. "Indeed, those who believe and do righteous deeds will have gardens beneath which rivers flow. Allah is the protector of those who believe." She had spent weeks searching, questioning, doubting, and hoping. And now, finally, the answer was clear. There was no hesitation left in her heart. She wanted to embrace Islam. Not just because of Assad. Not because of loneliness. But because she had found a truth that made her soul feel alive for the first time. The next morning, Lucia met Assad outside a small, simple mosque near the coast. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and wet earth as they walked side by side towards the entrance. Lucia's heart pounded in her chest, not from fear, but from overwhelming emotion. Assad paused before they entered. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. Lucia smiled, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I've never been more ready." Inside, a kind-faced imam welcomed them warmly. He had a gentle demeanor, and his eyes seemed to radiate kindness. Assad spoke briefly with him in Baisa. The imam nodded, then turned to Lucia. "In Islam," he said in slow, careful English, "we believe that faith must come from the heart. You do not need anything complicated. Just a sincere belief in one God, and acceptance of his last messenger, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him." Lucia nodded, her throat tight. The imam guided her gently through the words of the Shahida, first in Arabic, then in Spanish. "I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger." Lucia repeated the words slowly, her voice shaking, but strong. The moment she finished, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It was as if a lifetime of confusion, guilt, and emptiness had evaporated into the air, leaving behind only peace. Real, deep, unshakable peace. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Assad smiled gently, his own eyes misty. The imam congratulated her warmly. He offered her a clean white scarf, which Lucia gratefully accepted, wrapping it lightly over her hair. In that simple, humble mosque, Lucia Alvarez from Spain was no longer just a traveler. She had become Lucia bint Abdullah, a believer. A new chapter had begun. Later that day, they sat together in Coffee Bloom, sharing a quiet meal. Lucia played with the edge of her cup, feeling a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Assad," she said, looking up shyly, "I know I have a lot to learn. I'm still at the beginning." Assad nodded encouragingly. "You have a lifetime to learn. Islam is a journey, not a finish line." She smiled, grateful for his patience. After a pause, Assad's expression turned a little serious. "Lucia," he said carefully, "there's something else I want to ask." She raised an eyebrow. "What?" He took a deep breath. "Would you consider marrying me?" Lucia froze, blinking at him in surprise. He rushed to explain, his cheeks slightly flushed. I know it's sudden. And I want you to know, you are free. You're not obligated. But from the day we met, I felt something different with you. And now, seeing your heart, your courage, your sincerity, I believe Allah brought us together for a reason. Lucia felt her heart race again, but this time, with happiness. She thought of everything they had shared, the awkward beginning, the deep conversations, the silent support, the gentle pull towards something bigger than both of them. And she realized she felt the same way. Asad, she said, her voice soft, I would be honored. Asad's face broke into a radiant smile, pure and unguarded. Lucia laughed lightly, feeling the lightness she hadn't felt in years. Over the next few days, they planned a simple nikah ceremony. No extravagance. No grand celebrations. Just sincerity, family, and faith. Asad's mother was overjoyed when she heard the news. She welcomed Lucia with open arms, treating her like a daughter from the very beginning. Allah has written this for you both, she said, tears in her eyes. It is a blessing. They chose to hold the ceremony in the same small mosque where Lucia had taken her shaida. On the day of the nikah, Lucia wore a simple, elegant white dress, modest yet graceful. A soft cream-colored hijab framed her face. Asad wore a traditional white thobe, clean and dignified. They sat side by side in the mosque, surrounded by a small gathering of friends and family. The Imam led a short sermon about marriage in Islam, how it is a bond of mercy, love, and trust. Then came the simple, powerful words. Asad, do you accept Lucia bint Abdullah as your wife, according to the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Messenger? I accept, Asad said firmly, his voice steady. And you, Lucia, do you accept Asad as your husband, according to the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Messenger? Lucia smiled, her heart overflowing. I accept, she replied confidently. And just like that, they were husband and wife. As they stepped out of the mosque, hand in hand, the evening sun bathed the world in a soft, golden glow. Lucia looked up at Asad, tears brimming in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Asad squeezed her hand gently. Thank Allah, he said. He is the one who brought us together. And together they stepped into a new life, not without struggles, not without tests, but with a faith that could weather any storm. For in their hearts they carried the greatest treasure: Iman, hope, and love rooted in Allah. The first weeks of marriage were a beautiful whirlwind for Lucia and Asad. Simple, peaceful, yet filled with moments that would stay etched in their memories forever. They moved into a small house near the beach, nothing fancy, just 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, and a cozy living room where sunlight streamed through the windows every morning. It was enough. More than enough. Because their real home was not made of walls or furniture. It was built inside their hearts, stitched together with faith, love, and hope. Life settled into a gentle rhythm. In the early mornings, Asad would rise before dawn to pray far. Lucia, still learning, would sometimes wake up too, sitting quietly beside him, watching him bow and whisper prayers she was still memorizing. She found peace just in those moments, the serenity on Asad's face, the quiet connection between him and his Creator. She wanted that too. And little by little, she was finding her way. After breakfast, they often walked along the beach, the soft sand cool under their feet, the ocean stretching endlessly before them. They talked about everything: faith, dreams, fears, plans for the future. Lucia loved how Asad never rushed her. When she struggled with Arabic words during prayer, he smiled and encouraged her gently. One step at a time, he would say. Allah sees your effort. And she believed him. But real life, of course, was not a fairy tale. There were hard days too. Days when Lucia felt overwhelmed, adjusting to new routines, learning new things, leaving behind old habits. Days when she missed Spain, her family, the language, the familiarity. And Asad, for all his calmness, had his moments of frustration too, struggling to balance work at the cafe, finances, and now the responsibility of a household. One evening, after a long, tiring day, They sat silently across from each other at the dinner table. Lucia poked at her food, feeling a lump in her throat. "I miss home," she whispered. Assad looked up, his eyes softening immediately. "I know," he said gently. "It's okay to miss it. It's part of who you are. But sometimes," Lucia said, her voice cracking, "I feel like I don't fit anywhere anymore. Not there, and not fully here either." Assad reached across the table and took her hand. "You fit here," he said quietly, placing her hand against his chest. "In here. Always." Tears filled Lucia's eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of gratitude. Of being seen. Of being loved, even in her brokenness. Slowly, they learned how to carry each other's burdens. Assad surprised Lucia one afternoon by bringing home a small framed artwork with Spanish calligraphy. "La paciencia es luz." Patience is light. He hung it by their front door, a gentle reminder for both of them. Lucia, in turn, learned how to make Assad's favorite dishes, even though she burned the rice more than once. They laughed over the burnt rice. They laughed over spilled tea. They laughed when the kitchen filled with smoke and they had to open all the windows. They built a life not from perfection but from love. And in the quiet moments, after prayer, or while sipping coffee on the balcony, they would simply sit together, hearts content. Lucia's faith grew steadily. She started praying more regularly, even if she stumbled through the Arabic words. She began learning small surahs, memorizing the beautiful meanings. She loved the verse Assad often reminded her of. Indeed, with hardship comes ease. It became her motto on difficult days. And when she felt doubt creeping in, when old memories or fears tried to pull her back, she would open her Qur'an and find strength there. Assad never forced her pace. He simply walked beside her, a steady companion on the journey. They encouraged each other in small acts of worship, visiting the mosque, giving a little charity, fasting together. Faith wasn't something heavy or scary. It was woven into their everyday lives, like sunlight through a window, like the waves touching the shore. One day, sitting under a palm tree by the beach, Lucia looked out at the sparkling water and whispered, "I'm not lost anymore." Assad smiled beside her. "Alhamdulillah," he said. Lucia turned toward him, her face glowing with quiet happiness. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I used to think I had to find myself by traveling the world." "And now?" Assad asked. Lucia smiled softly. "Now I know. I had to find Allah. And through him, I found everything." Assad's heart swelled with gratitude. He knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they had something priceless between them, a bond rooted not in fleeting emotions, but in eternal faith. They sat there for a long time, hand in hand, watching the sun sink slowly into the ocean, painting the sky in gold and crimson. It wasn't a perfect life. But it was real. It was blessed. And it was just the beginning.